So we are still working our way through the Gospel of Mark. This story today, we are just coming from another healing, another child. Jesus has healed a child that the disciples could not heal. He says this kind of demon can only be sent out with prayer. And then they start walking. They walk away from a boy restored to health and life. They are walking away from a family who no longer has to worry about their kid being hurt. And what are they discussing? Who is the greatest? It is an interesting choice of conversation as Jesus has tried again to explain to them about the suffering and the death and the resurrection. And it's too much. And so the conversation turns to who is the greatest. In the letter from James, he talks about sort of two different kinds of wisdom: the wisdom of this world and the wisdom of love. It is so much more tempting to want the wisdom of this world, to know exactly how things line up, to know what is the hierarchy, what is the order, what is it that we can expect. We want to be safe. And because of how we want and how we go about wanting, we fight. Because of our insecurities, we try to establish these orders. We want to know who is the best, even if it's not us. Who is the valedictorian? Who is the best sports team? How are people doing in popularity polls? We just want to know. And James says these conflicts and disputes come from cravings that are at war within us. And those cravings yield bad wisdom. The cravings yield being boastful and false to the truth, what James calls unspiritual and devilish wisdom. Boasting and mean-spiritedness, pride and ambition and twisting the truth. The disciples are walking along, worrying about ranking and certainty. And I understand, in the face of everything that they do not know, they are clinging to what they can control and understand. So what were you talking about? Asks Jesus. And they shuffle around and look at their feet. We were talking about who is the greatest. And hopefully Jesus does not roll his eyes too hard. But then he says, here, it's like this. And he takes a child and places it in the midst of them, probably only because he didn't have a puppy. He says, it is like this. It is like welcoming the smallest and the most vulnerable. It is like welcoming the fragile and the unimportant. It is in welcoming this sort of creature that you welcome me, and in welcoming me, you welcome the love that sent me. It sounds simple to welcome the small and the vulnerable and the fragile and the unimportant. It sounds simple, so why is it so hard? My main guess, as it usually is with things like this, is fear. The fear of looking foolish, fears about the future, fear of not knowing, fear of uncertainty. We are anxious, I think, even about our own anxiety. Like the disciples who are afraid to ask Jesus to clarify this death and resurrection. We are hesitant to say that we do not know. We are hesitant to admit our own ignorance. Sometimes it is scary to say, this sounds scary, God. And so we come up with our 10,000 ways to keep ourselves safe. We hold on to what we do know, those orders of hierarchy, who knowing who is the greatest. I think if we can organize the hurt, we will not have to feel as much pain. We try to make ourselves safe with possessions, and this too is bad wisdom. Wanting something and not having it, coveting something and not being able to obtain it, and engaging in disputes and conflicts. But it does, I think, make us feel a little bit safer to have those things, or to think if we have that thing that somebody else has, that we will perhaps feel safe. But instead of trying to take any of that away from them, Jesus says, here, look, this is a child. welcome this child. And the good news is that there is room for us in this kingdom of love, and we are welcome here. But we are not welcome so that we may be great or greatest, but so that we may welcome others. We must make room for those things that seem unimportant to bad wisdom. We must make room for things that seem insignificant to the part of us that wants to know what's in it for us. We have to be on the lookout, scouting all around us for the vulnerable and the tender places. And instead of focusing on what we think will keep us safe, we are supposed to focus on who we are welcoming. We are called to spend our entire lives on the lookout for love in the weak and the vulnerable, because this is the wisdom of love, and this is how God shows up. God shows up in the places that the wisdom of this world discounts and overlooks. God shows up in the soft and the unimportant places. God shows up in the weak and in the vulnerable. So let us put down everything that we are carrying. Let us set down every burden of bad wisdom so that our arms can be open to welcome love. Amen.